Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy, Lore, and More, we've got Claudia Klein returning to talk to me about her new book, Song of Siege and Shadows. So let's hear all about it. Welcome back. Tell us about the book.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
So I wrote a new book called Song of Siege and Shadows, and it is, it is a romantic fantasy in a world of all elves. So it was heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings. And my favorite part about Lord of the Rings was the elves, so I decided I'm going to write a world of all elves and see how that happens. So and the plot line is basically female blacksmith's apprentice lives in a society where basically women are typically housewives, and she somehow was able to become an apprentice blacksmith, which is a man's job, and she has no plans to marry. But then one day her father introduces her to her intended and says, you have to spend time with him because you guys are going to get betrothed really soon. Her world is crushed. And then also, so there's that lovely little romantic subplot. And then there's also like evil overlord is about to come to the capital city where they live, and he's about to lay siege to it. So that's the premise of the book.
So before we jump into your next work, which I do want to hear, so like with Tolkien, all right, I'm a huge Tolkien nerd, so I have a few questions.
Okay.
So with Tolkien, like his elves are basically like one rung below angels. They're immortal, beautiful, wise, race, who in the first and second age, that wisdom is hard won through many mistakes they made in the first, especially in the first age, when there were some shady things going on there, some kinslaying, over some magic jewels. So are your elves like are they like the Tolkien elves? Are they like these mystical wisdom, mystical wise, immortal beings that are like just below angels? Or are they a little more earthy?
They're a little more earthy because honestly, what I did for this world, I started writing this world when I was 16, and basically I read Lord of the Rings, and then I started writing the story that became this series, the Karaphyllon Chronicles. And so I didn't know that much about Tolkien lore and like exactly who the elves were. I just knew I read the books, I watched the movies, I liked the character of Legolas, I liked the character of Galadriel. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I liked Galadriel. I didn't like Arwen in the movies, but she was okay in the books, and she wasn't in it that much. Anyways, so they're a little more earthy. Like this is like it's a new adult fantasy, and it's like a find yourself type trope for the main character Gwynneth. And they're not quite angelic because like I put them in a world all by themselves. So like we have all sorts of, I would say, humanistic desires and wants. So like, I don't know. It's really hard because like my siblings read my stories growing up, and they're like, these are exactly like humans. You got to make it more like elves. So how I was looking up like what is true about elves. So I found like they don't sleep, they dream. So my elves, they don't sleep, they dream, and they dream dreams of like the afterlife, which is called Starathalasa. And they sail away in a boat to go over to Starathalasa when they're done with their time here on Karaphyllon. And then they also have, I was inspired by the way Tolkien used magic in his world. I read in some sort of a book about Tolkien that he used magic, and like the elves have the magic of creation, and like they create beautiful things. So that's the kind of magic that the elves know in Song of Siege and Shadows. And what we find out is like they used to know the ancient fighting magic, but it has been lost through time. So they send off Princess Selena, who showed up in my Erlingu trilogy. She shows up in The Wizard. So it's kind of like a bit of cross-pollination between the two series. So they sent her off to a planet called Neem, where she is going to learn the ancient fighting magic and bring that knowledge back to them, because evil overlord is about to come and they don't know how to fight against him using magic.
Whoa, okay, wait. So in Tolkien's thing, they invest a part of their Fea, I think it's called, which is their soul, into it, and that's how they imbue it with magic and create things. Is that what they're doing? And also, how does she go to a different planet? I need explanation.
It goes from just being epic fantasy to they use portals, I think, but I haven't in the writing of Karaphyllon Chronicles, I haven't described how she ended up on Neem. But
you gotta do that.
But in the Wizard, the character who goes to Neem in this one, he creates a magic portal to get him there. Like he knew enough from the books on magic to like do the ritual to make the portal, and then he went to learn.
Okay, that's cool. I like that's and they know it's a different planet. They not like a different realm.
Yes, it's different planets, and I was heavily inspired by Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, where he's doing different planets. And I haven't read all of Sarah J. Maas's universe, but her universe is starting to interconnect, and I'm not sure how it's interconnecting, like if it's different planets or different realms. Yeah, I'm not sure. So
yeah, I haven't read the whole Cosmere yet. I've read the Elantris books. Not sure where you go from there, but I will eventually figure it out and continue with that someday. Cool. There's a lot of books in the Cosmere, and it keeps growing. So
yeah, and a lot of them are long. Like the Stormlight Archive, he's making all those books 400,000 words. That's a lot for one book.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I just split them up. But he's traditionally published, so it's different. You have to put as much into because of the way traditional publishing works is that you're not guaranteed. Well, he is guaranteed the next book, but like the rest of, if you or I were to become traditionally published, it would not be guaranteed that there would be a next book. So you have to cram as much of the story as you need to tell into the book that they have purchased the rights to. Because you know that one is going to get published unless you do something really boneheaded and like that author who went out and was one starring and you know being just generally a abusive, horrible person to other people and got caught, and there was a huge uproar over it and got her publishing contract canceled over it because that's horrible behavior. It was more than that, but she was just a really horrible person. But it was horrible what she was doing. But and assuming you don't do that, which that was the first time I'd ever heard of somebody doing something like that, that book will get published in a few years. Assuming you actually write it and get it to them, but you're not guaranteed that they're going to publish the next book. That's why a lot of traditionally published books are standalones or duologies, because if the first book does really well, they'll let you do a second one, but it's not guaranteed that you'll get a third one. So a lot of traditionally published series just end, especially fantasy, after like 2 books, or it's just a giant, massive standalone. Like I can picture the book, The Prior of the Orange Tree. Yeah, where you squeeze in all the story you possibly can. So, but we're indies. We don't have to do that. We can have 12 books in the series if we want. We can tell a nice contained story and then tell the sequel and tell another sequel. As as much story needs to get told, which is I think one of the cool benefits to the way that we do things. I'm rambling. I'll stop. I'm not here to sell people on self-publishing. I don't sell services on it. I'm not one of those authors. All right, so that's interesting about Sarah J. Maas. I've only read I read one of her books. I wasn't the target audience. We'll leave it at that. It was it was well written. It's just the story wasn't for me. So I was bored. Nothing happened. I kept reading. I'm like, people love the series. Why is nothing happening?
Remember which book you read?
It was the first book in the Crescent City series, and like there was lots of creepy like instances with guys, and I was like, but nothing actually like. Then there was this festival thing at the end, and I'm like, okay, but
Yeah, that's the one series that I haven't read yet, so now you made me curious. I wasn't going to read it because I heard it wasn't epic fantasy. I heard it was urban fantasy or something.
It was very atmospheric. It's very well written. She's a really good like for description. Like there's a lot of description and stuff, and the description is beautiful. But I need a story. Like something actually happened, and the characters weren't all that likable, and they didn't. From the beginning of the book to the end, there was no change. They were exactly the same. You could just pick them up and teleport them to the end of the book, and like nothing changed for them, really.
Oh dear.
I don't know. It was, like I said, I don't, it's not a bad book. I think I'm just not the target audience. I also love military, fantasy books and stuff. So like, I don't think I was the target audience.
Yes.
And no shade on her or anything. I just don't think I was the target audience. You might love it. You might be the target audience. I wasn't it. Because there definitely was a story, but it was not an action-packed whatever with lots of magic and stuff. And that's kind of the story that I like. And I think it was just a bad recommendation. Somebody was maybe, that described it in a way that I was like, oh, I might like that. And it was $5 on Audible. And I was like, why not? I see people talking about this and loving this. And it just, I bought many books for $5 on Audible that weren't for me. And I bought many that were. So no shade on anybody. It happens. Not every book is for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do we want to move into reading this
episode? Yes. Okay. I need to stop babbling.
But I'm going to read you chapter 1, the first scene in Song of Siege and Shadows. This book has a prologue that happens 3 years before chapter 1. But I decided on chapter 1 because I really like it. All right. So chapter 1, The Shadow. He has come. With him, he brings creatures that do his bidding. Throws from the black lands that don't belong here, with the bodies of men and the heads of wolves. Everywhere he goes, death follows him. We have named him Gorion, meaning death, because that is what he is. The shadow we spoke of years ago, while gathered around the table, those whispers of a darkness creeping through our land, has come to fruition. In him, he has already brought half our little land underneath his shadow. Karaphyllon, the living land, the world of us elves, the world I hold so dear to my heart, for it is the only life I know. No one has withstood against Gorion, and I am beginning to think that no one can. Surely there must be someone who can defeat him. King Athiel has called all able-bodied elf warriors to the capital to form an army, Gwynneth, father told me. His voice sounded hopeful. It was late evening, and we were just about to retire to bed. He sat in his armchair in the parlor, relaxing after a long day's work at the palace before he retired to bed. He had changed out of his state robes and wore the elegant clothes of a noble elf. His breeches reached to his knees, followed by high socks and square-toed shoes with elaborate buckles. A black jacket with big brass buttons covered his white shirt. Honestly, I thought his state robes looked more comfortable than what we of the Finth War tribe wore while relaxing. Father is a lord of the council, the most important Elvish governing body there is next to the king of Karaphyllon. He spends long days at the palace, talking politics with King Athiel and the 10 other council members. I was glad he was home tonight and not working late. Father's position in the government is the reason I know so much about Gorion, the monster from the Blacklands, who was not supposed to be able to enter our world, yet did. And it's why I'm afraid. We sat in our little parlor as we did every night he was home. The candles lit on each end of the candles lit on each of the end tables near our chairs. Their light was just enough to read by, a flickering cheeriness in complete contrast to the darkness Father talked of. I looked up from the book I held in my lap, instantly alert and ready to hear what news Father had to say about the war that would soon take place. My fingers holding the book trembled. I didn't like feeling frightened, but the prospect of war coming to our little land scared me to death. Karaphyllon hadn't been in a war since the ancient days, not a war led by an outside invasion. The king's treasure had kept our land hidden and safe all these years. It wasn't a good sign that the magic the treasure held seemed to be fading, if it had allowed this Gorion from the Blacklands to enter our world. What else, Father? I asked, tucking my long brown hair behind my pointed ears, afraid to ask, but needing to know all the same. Gorion's movement seemed to be taking him closer and closer here to Drescany, Father went on. King Athiel believes it is here we will make our last stand against Scorian to utterly defeat him. Tuscany is the capital of Karaphyllon, surrounded by the 11 provinces, each province belonging to an elf tribe, each tribe ruled by a lord. Tuscany, which sits in the center of our world, is where the king, the chief tribeless, lives and rules our world with a benevolent and just hand. The tribeless, the top of the elvish nobility, is what each elf desires to become, but it is denied to many of us. And now this Gorian marches on our capital to wage war on our mighty tribeless king. Surely if all able-bodied warriors in Karaphyllon join to fight against him, we'll be able to overcome him, right, father? This is my hope, Gwynneth, he answered with a small smile. The entire council is meeting later this week to discuss the king's plans. I might be busier than normal. I wanted to let you know. Now off to bed with you. It's been a long day, and we're all tired. I'll be turning in shortly myself. I trudged up to bed, weary from the day's work at the smithy. I'm still an apprentice to Carlyle, one of the city's most esteemed blacksmiths. Now in the third and final year of my apprenticeship, at age 18, I'll be getting my certificate of completion soon. Just a few more weeks of work, and I'll be able to start up my own forge if I so desire. These days, the king kept us busy making weapons as he prepares our troops for this oncoming war. Weapons are the one thing we lack, being a peaceful nation, but the thing we need most now. Each Elos, which is my word for male elf, has trained with the sword, but whether they own one is debatable. I'm glad I can work in this way, supplying a need in our land. As I unbuttoned my shoes and took off my stockings, I shook my head once again, marveling that I was taking on an Elos's trade. It's not something a typical Elasin, which means female elf, does. Typically, Elasin learn how to keep house, manage accounts, sewing, and the like, all the gentle arts that a good Elasin wishing to marry and raise a family might learn. I was not a typical Elasin. Timothy had seen to that, begging father to let me join him in his trade. For that I was forever grateful. I washed my face and hands in the little wash basin by the window, trying to picture my loved ones. If only father had gotten one more family painting done before they passed. But all I had to go off of was an old painting that hung in our stairwell. It was done when I was just 10 years old, back in the days when Timothy still wore his hair long like a fanwas, which means boy elf. Before choosing day, before we became Elas and Elasin, I pulled back the covers and got into bed. Blowing out the candle, I tried to quiet my mind so I could fall into my dreams. Elves do not sleep like I have heard mortals in other worlds do. We dream of a life lived long ago, or a life we have yet to live. No one knows which. It was a busy day ahead, back to the smithy for me, and back to the council for father. They were occupied preparing for that thing I feared most, war. The end.
Oh, I thought it was longer. I'm always unprepared when the excerpts end. All right. So we talked about we started talking about how the elves there are creators, and that is their magic. How does that work?
I haven't gone too deep into learning how the magic works myself, but basically she uses it to like help her make the fire hotter at the forge. And their magic is the same type of magic system that I had in my Erlangu series, which is a mix between Harry Potter magic and Star Wars magic, where we're using like hand movements a little bit like the Star Wars magic, and then we're also using spoken words like the Harry Potter magic. So she can make the fire hotter at the forge. She also uses it in like engraving the special symbols and stuff to make it make the swords and weapons personalized weapons for the elves. That's about as far as I went with the creation magic in this book. I'm working on the sequel, which is actually up for pre-order on Amazon. It's called Dance of Dreams and Nightmares, and there we see her kind of using what she knows about creation magic to somewhat fight with it.
Okay, that's cool. So how many books are going to be in this series?
So when I first wrote it, it was originally a trilogy. But now that I'm rewriting it a couple years later as a better writer, I think it's a projected 4 to 5 book series.
Oh, cool. That's always neat when you go back and find more things to write about in there, more stories to tell. That's always fun.
Yeah.
So we've got the elves. Is their world magical, or are they living in like a regular world? Like, how does that, like, they're not living in
Um,
like Rivendell or Lothlorien, like your version of it, right? Or, like, how does that?
so I will show our YouTube channel the map a little bit. So I drew a map, and basically the world is, I grew up in the Midwest, so it's heavily inspired by Midwest. We have the north and the south are mountains blocking both the north and the south so that they're impassable. So we don't know what lies beyond the north and the south of Karaphyllon. And then we have a lot of forests, and then this is a bad map. Okay. But towards the west, we have a desert. And then in the middle are the Great Plains, and in the very center is the capital city, the province of Tuscany, and then the city of Tuscany. And then basically the lords of the council are in charge of each individual province. So they kind of own that land and run it, and they're in charge of the tenants on the land. So yeah, just, I think that helps describe it a little bit. It's so like the land isn't like magical.
Okay.
You're explaining, it's more like we just get to live here in this cool secondary world.
That's cool too. Like, you know, somebody's got to live in cool secondary worlds that are not like super magical all of the time. Like, you know,
Yeah.
not everything can be super magical. So then, so they can do a portal to another world, but they don't know what's beyond the mountains. That's interesting. Like how, like, that's just like just a really interesting, I can't think of the word now. The word that's coming to mind, dichotomy, but that's not the right word for this. And is it because they know about this other world that they can make a portal to it? But since they don't know what's on the other side of the mountains, they can't make a portal. Like they can't climb over it. They can't see what's there. There's no information, and is that what it is? Like they
basically think instead of their planet being round, they think their planet is like a box, and there's literally walls, and like so the mountains are kind of like against the walls. That's what they think.
Okay.
I
That's
have
interesting.
ideas on another spinoff series that's in a different country on the planet in the world that Karaphyllon's in.
Okay.
I'm not going to give any spoilers because I'm not sure when this spinoff series is coming along, but it's a good idea. I ran it past my husband the other night. He thinks it doesn't quite fit into what I'm doing for the entire universe. So we'll see.
I think you could make it work. I mean, as long as if the magic is similar, if the magic and the even if the magic, because I heard like with the way Brandon did the Cosmere, the magic is different in different places. So I guess you don't even need the same magic, and the worlds are very different. I haven't read his whole Cosmere yet, but I think if he can do it, anybody could do it.
You can, and like it's your own writing. You can do whatever you want.
That's true.
It doesn't have to follow what Brandon Sanderson is doing with different planets.
Oh no, of course not.
Like, who knows how he's even going to end that? I don't know if there's any crossover other than the Hoyd character, and even that character seems to be a different character in each book.
I don't know. I haven't read all of that, so I don't know. I can't comment on that.
Okay.
And I myself, just everything is on the same world. I've decided it's all right now. Everything is set in the same country, or a different, and they may go off into other magical realms. But yeah. So I have that connection, but I think you could do it. I think if you find a plausible, and I don't think you may not even need to explain it in the story. Like you just may need to explain the connection, even if it's tenuous, to, like, you could do it in like an offer note or just in your newsletter. And then later you could make the connection stronger if you want. I don't think you have to go crazy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not sure that's like a requirement.
No. There are no rules for writing. You can do whatever you want, especially if you're an indie author.
Well, and like if like people read your books because they like your writing style, they like the way you handle characters and the themes and things that you write about. So I feel like if you're, as long as you're staying within, and this is similar to your other writing, in tone and all that, like I don't think you need a strong link.
Mm-hmm.
People read it because they like your other stuff.
Yeah.
And if you find a strong link between them later, it could be like just a cool thing. Like, oh yeah, these things now connect. Newsflash. And I think that could be cool too. I read a series like that and I cannot think of what it was. I didn't think they were connected, and then it's like some later book there was a connection. And then and Stephen King has this. Like he has a bunch of standalones, and then apparently some of them have like minor connections between them. They take place in the same place. There's not characters crisscrossing, but there's mentions of things. So I think you can handle it any way you like, or not. They could just not be connected. Some authors don't connect everything.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to go with it.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we talked about the world a little bit. So let's talk about her society. So it sounds like a traditional patriarchy, but with elves.
It's very, very traditional patriarchy. And I guess I didn't do that on purpose. It just kind of happened. That's just how the story went. As I was writing this book in particular, like how I wrote the original trilogy. So I started writing this in this world when I was 16. That was a long time ago now.
That's cool. I mean, I haven't had the guts to go back and look at stuff I wrote when I was 16 and try and make anything like sellable out of it. So let me just give you a round of applause for their bravery to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's changed a lot. The plotline is completely, the plotline is still pretty much the same, but like the aspects of it have completely changed. But anyways, I wrote book 3 in the trilogy first. And then in college, I wrote book 2 in the trilogy. And I only got about halfway through before I quit writing that one. And then post-college, I started writing became Song of Siege and Shadows. And I only wrote about half of that before it was year 2016 when I started writing Song of Siege and Shadows during NaNoWriMo. And that was also the year where I met with some other writers for NaNoWriMo. And then one was an indie author. And then she's like, and we were talking about publishing, and she introduced me to the indie author space and said, hey, here's how you hit the publish button on KDP and go to town being an indie author. So I took a break from this world because I was substitute teaching at the time, and I was also volunteering at the school library. So the school librarian was very wise, and she was like, I don't think the world of Karaphyllon is ready to be put into the world because it's the story that's near and dear to your heart. I think you should write a story that's already written, that you have in your backlist, that you don't really care about that much. That should be the first book that you publish. So that is what became my debut, The Heir, which was a story that I had already written, and it was in my backlist, and I didn't really care about it. And then I was busy from 2016 until 2023 writing the trilogy for the Heirloom Goose series. And now I'm just kind of coming back and writing Karaphyllon because I finally feel like I'm a good enough writer where I can do the Karaphyllon Chronicles justice.
That's cool. So I gotta ask. So what made you decide that? Did you know when you were writing book 3 that it was book 3, or did you think it was book 1? Because I've had that experience. So I wrote a book, I thought it was book 1, and realized after writing it that this is not a good place to start this. People would be very confused if they're not in my head. So go on.
I thought it was book 1, but then there was so much backstory about about one of the characters who's like in the book but not really a main character, that I was like, this needs a book all on its own to tell this backstory. And then same thing happened. I started writing book 2 in the trilogy, and then I was like, we need more backstory on like how the evil overlord originally came to their world, etc., etc. So I started writing book 1 in the trilogy, which was Song of Siege and Shadows. So that's how I started went from back to front in writing the trilogy.
That's cool. It's always interesting because I see so many posts in authors groups where like authors like, oh, and I started here and it was book one, and I don't see too many posts of people who are like, well, I started writing this and realized it wasn't book one and had to work my way backwards, because I've had to do that a few times and it's complicated when you're not sure where things begin.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why
you know where they end.
One of the reasons why so far for preparing Karaphyllon Chronicles for publication, I haven't written. I've obviously written and published Song of Siege and Shadows. The sequel, Dance of Dream and Nightmares, is up because what happened with the series is book one in the original trilogy, I decided to split in half. So the whole story arc of Gwynneth's story is Song of Siege and Shadows and Dance of Dreams and Nightmares. And then book three is the original book two. So I haven't actually started writing it because so much has changed with the entire world so far that I'm like, I don't know where to start writing this book or how. So yeah, I'm a little afraid, but I'm also waiting until I have like a whole huge block of time where I can just write all of book three all in one go.
Okay, so that's definitely it's definitely going to be a little bit of a while before that comes out. It's not a bad thing. You know, we all have to do what we can, write at our own speeds.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping to Dance of Dreams and Nightmares is set for publication on March 27th, 2025. So I'm hoping before that book three will be out at least a year later.
Okay.
If not before that, we'll see.
Okay. No, that's, we all have different lives, and some stories are easier to write than others. It took me a year to write a trilogy because the characters were particularly feral and refused to do any of the things they were supposed to. I had to let them do a side quest in the middle of the darn thing just to get them back on track. Yeah. I hope that they don't give you as much trouble as mine did. They were just not they were not in a cooperative mood. I felt like all I did was butt heads with them.
Well, in the past, my characters haven't given me that much trouble, but oh my goodness, there's this character that showed up in Dance of Dreams and Nightmares, and I was just kind of like, what? You're not doing what I had planned your character would do for this story. So it went somewhere completely different. Yeah, I'm gonna have to work on it. I got a developmental edit on Dance of Dreams and Nightmares, so my editor had a lot to say about this one character because it was probably the most underdeveloped character out of all of them. But if you want to read a little prequel that has this character that shows up in Dance of Dreams and Nightmares that's not in Song of Siege and Shadows, go look for my prequel novella, Court of Shadows and Games. She is in there, and her name is Karina. So you can go read about her and be like, she's fun.
And they can wish you well on the sequels and dealing with her.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, all right. So this is so the story is so it's epic fantasy, and I know there's a romance in it. So you say it's got elements of fantasy and romance. What is that like? So what does that mean? It's not a fantasy and it's not a romance. It's somewhere in the middle. Like, what does that mean?
I was originally calling it a romantasy on all my social channels, talking about this book because I feel like that word is a very new word, and there's a lot of debate onto what all that encompasses.
Yeah.
Because this one, like, I would say all my books except for The Wizard have a romantic subplot where there's always like a girl meets boy and they fall in love, or like one of them's more in love to begin with, and then the other one's kind of like, let me think about if I love you back. So this one is definitely, when I was writing it, I was just writing a story for fun. And I didn't realize how much of a romance it would be, but it is like a forced betrothal romance. Basically, girl is planning a career, has no does not want to get married at all. And then her father has other plans for her. And since it's a patriarchal society, she kind of has to obey her father. So in comes handsome elvish lord who, like, he's super nice and he says that he loves her and he cares about her and he just wants to protect her. And he's actually the handsomest elf she's ever met. So she's kind of like, well, I had no plans to get married, but he's really handsome. So she's just that's why this story is kind of like a find yourself, because she's trying to decide, like, should I have the career or should I do what all the other elvish women are doing and get married?
And she can't, and she has to put aside being the blacksmith in order to do that. Like, her society won't let her do both. Like, she can't have.
Well, we shall see. That's where a lot of the drama comes in.
Right.
And you can just read the book to find out how. But yeah, there's a lot of drama around, like, oh, should I actually give up this dream career?
Yeah.
And thankfully, our hero, Alec, who is the handsome elvish lord, he does not think that she has to give up her career. He thinks she can do both. So that's great, because, like, they're going to get married, or we hope they're going to get married. We don't know if they're going to get married, actually.
Yeah.
But, like, yeah, premise is, like, they might get married eventually. And so, like, if he's on board with her being a blacksmith too, then, like, that's great.
And so tell us more about him. Like, so other than him being a handsome elvish lord, like what does he do?
Okay,
does he just swan around looking handsome?
Kind of. So I
to the masses.
well, I read a historical fiction series by Philippa Gregory that went over the Plantagenets and the Tudors in England, like all the royal line. So I kind of got a good grasp of, like, how medieval England did their whole, like, the king and then the lords, and how they were all kind of like political figures. Then they also owned all these lands. So that's kind of like how this world is set up. Like, so he's a lord. He's the youngest elf lord on the council. I want to say he's 21, and most of the other elves are, like, ranging from, like, 60, 70 to, like, 500 years old, because elves can get really old. So they kind of look down on him because he's young, and he has kind of some new ideas for the council. So, like, he's busy on the council, like, they're all preparing for war, and it's up to the lords to decide how they're going to run their armies. And, like, all the lords are required to come up with an army from their own province to, like, donate to the cause. So he's busy with that. We do see him in some scenes with the council, and they're deciding on stuff. And then in the meantime, he's just he came up from Anwythel, which is his province, to basically court and get betrothed to Gwynneth. So he's staying with them. So it's also a forced proximity, strangers to lovers, romantic fantasy, because he's staying with them. And it's a little bit awkward because she's kind of like, no way am I gonna get betrothed to you, because I want to be a blacksmith. So we see him just kind of like trying to woo her and persuade her in a very, what I want to say is a loving way, to, like, convince her that I'm a good guy, you should want to marry me. Reviewers say his character is a little bit controlling, and I might need to give it a reread to see, like, what they're seeing and how I can change that for the better in Dance with Dreams and Nightmares, because that's what they don't like about his character.
Wait, so if they live a long time, like, what is an elf considered an adult if they live for a long time? Because in Tolkien's thing, you're not considered an adult, so you're like 100. Like, is there like an age in this world where you're considered an adult?
I would say it's 18. That's one of the things that I didn't think all the way through before I started writing, and then it was like, these kids are like 18, because I wanted to be more relatable. Like, I've read a couple of books about elves that aren't Tolkien, and it was always like 18-year-old human girl marries 150-year-old elf guy, and it's creepy. So hard to relate to 150 years. So I just want to make it more relatable by making them closer, like the main character is closer to, like, oh, she's 18, so, like, I can think of her as like an 18-year-old.
But that's, like, if you're gonna live for like 500 years, like, maybe you don't want to be getting married that young. Like,
so Yeah, a lot of the elves, by the time they lived on Karaphyllon about 500 years, they decided to go over to their elvish heaven, which is Starathalasa.
And what is the Elvish heaven like?
I
What's the
haven't
backstory for that?
Well,
Like,
I haven't. Well, the backstory is basically like it's kind of like how the elves sail away in Lord of the Rings, how the elves sail away to whatever Tolkien's afterlife was.
Valinor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is,
Um,
yeah.
so
It's
that's
the
where I got the
undying
idea.
lens. Yeah, where you
Yeah,
don't,
that's
because the
kind of like
elves don't die.
yeah. I don't think I have much about the lore in it yet. And I'm not sure what it's like because they never go there, I don't think. I'll have to see how the last book ends up, whether or not they're actually going to go there, but it's probably going to be like in the original Lord of the Rings, we didn't really see Valinor. We
Mhm.
just sailed off into the west. So yeah, it's in Elvish heaven is where the Elvish god resides. Like he was originally on Karaphyllon, kind of teaching the elves how to live, and then he kind of went away to the Elvish afterlife, and that's where he resides. So they're all kind of looking forward to getting to go and meet him.
That's cool. So, but he could come back if he's a god, right?
Um, Probably, but he's not going to.
Okay. He's got stuff to do there, I guess.
Yeah.
So so then who is this Dark Lord and why is this Dark Lord coming? What does he want? Or
Okay,
she?
so all my monsters in all the books I've written so far, all they want is like to take over the world, enslave it, or else kill everybody on the world. Not really for any particular reason other than that they're evil, and evil people want evil things. So his
Mhm.
name is Gorion, and he is the first villain that I ever created, and he is this monster that looks halfway in between Narnia's Calorman god Tash, which is like a bird-like creature with a beak, and then he kind of looks like what's his name, Thanos from Marvel, from Avengers Endgame. So he kind of looks like in between those two characters. And then yeah, they're called, like, they originally called him the Shadow because they've been hearing about him for at least the past 3 years. There's been whispers about him for 3 years. You can read more of Court and Shadows of Games as to how he makes his first appearance. It's very traumatic, and I keep it YA middle grade level, like gore, but it's interesting. It's very similar to Harry Potter's Goblet of Fire when Voldemort comes in during the competition. Um, and yeah, he's just kind of pure evil. He's from the Black Lands. The Black Lands is basically where all the monsters in the entire universe reside. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but
Mhm.
they think he is the Lord of the Black Lands, which is like the main evil guy who's like in charge of all the other evil guys in the universe. So yeah, that's where he's from, and we think he's the Lord of the Blacklands. So he's
And
really evil. And then he has
okay.
all these minions called Throws, which are my version of orcs. I just didn't want to use the word orc.
Yeah.
And they have long arms like a monkey, and then short legs like a monkey, but then they have the head of a wolf, and then their bodies, instead of looking like a monkey, they look more like men, and they are kind of easy to kill, the way we see how Aragorn in the Fellowship of the Ring movie can just take on all those orcs all at once. They're kind of like that. But there's like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of them, and they're all coming to lay siege on the capital. And they probably outnumber the Elvish army, probably 10 to 1.
Wow. That's a lot. So where does he get these throws from? Does he create them? Do they naturally occurring creatures?
I'm not 100% sure, but I want to say he creates them.
Okay. That's pretty wild. Um and then what is the the country that the Dark Lord comes from. What is that like? Is that
It's kind of, it looks a lot like Mordor, except I
okay?
would say it's darker, like black. It's like it's completely always night. Lots of fire and smoke and ash. We're not going to see that until a couple series down the road, where basically I'm going to write a bunch of series with a bunch of different fantasy creatures. And then it's going to be like the Avengers take on the Lord of the Blacklands.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So they're all gonna like team up from all these different stories. That's pretty neat. And is that so that's the arc of this 5-book series, or that's something outside of this series?
That's something outside of this series.
So where are these other books going to be, in a separate series, or?
Yeah, they're going to be in a separate series. I think I'm basically going to write about 5 different series, all in an interconnected universe. And then I'm going to write the series of like all the Avengers coming together to finally get rid of everybody. And then that's going to be the end of however long the universe ends up being.
That's really neat. All right, so everybody look for that in 2050. I'm kidding.
Yeah, pretty much.
I've done big crossovers. They're hard to predict.
It's going to be so much fun to try and like make everything work together. I think it's going to be more complicated than what Marvel did with their universe, I feel like.
It's frustrating and complicated, but because you have to set things up in each series, and you end up having to take out some of the minor players in each series. Yeah, but it's doable. Mm-hmm. It is definitely doable. I've done it twice. It's not fun to plot.
Yeah, I might.
Some of it isn't fun to write, but some of it
I'm
is.
a pantser, but like for this, I might need to like start plotting like now before I make some major mistakes in all the series.
Yeah, I don't recommend plotting it on the fly. I only did it because I didn't know that's what the characters intended. They didn't tell me this is what they were planning. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't tell me. I did not know that that's what I was writing at the time. I'd have made some different choices.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had no idea. Yeah, and I know they're doing it again, and I don't know how they're gonna bring it about. So I see it coming, like the train barreling towards me, but all I see is the light from the train. I can't see where it's gonna. So I know I'm gonna end up plotting another one of these things probably in the next couple of months, but I don't know the shape of it yet. So
yeah.
Send good thoughts.
Okay, I
will. You good thoughts on this one. Yeah, it's fun when you reread it, but writing it, you want to tear your hair out sometimes.
Yep.
But yeah. And then you were going to give us an update on Wheel of Time because you were going to read through it. How's that going?
So I think when I came on the podcast last, I was on book 8 of Wheel of Time. I finished it.
You did?
I read from, when was it? Like February? I read from February till August. I read books 8 through 14. And like book 8 was kind of where I was like,
that's the one I threw against the wall.
Can go on. Like book 7 was okay, but it was starting to get like downhill. And then like it just got worse and worse. Books 8 and then book 9 was worse than that, and then book 10 was worse than that. And then Brandon Sanderson, book 11, he was still pretty bad, but everyone says the last book that Robert Jordan wrote in his series, he kind of revived it a little bit. So you can see that a little bit, but I didn't see as much as what everybody's talking about. And then Brandon Sanderson just came in after Robert Jordan passed away. He just tied all the loose ends together, and it was great, especially book 14. Like book 14, oh my goodness. So we finally got the last battle that has been promised since book 1. And it was 300 pages of battle? 300 pages. Wow. In about 20 different POVs. And it was absolutely crazy. It was definitely like heart pounding. I had to read it almost all in one day. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I read that whole much. That it was just way too much epic epic, like heart pounding
Yeah.
adventure
I'm
all
gonna
in
have
like
to read that one.
all
I'm
crammed.
not rereading the series. I'm not gonna slog through 8 to I
Yeah,
might just
I'm
read
trying to
that
like
one big battle book and see if I can.
yeah, I mean, you could almost read book 14 without reading books 8 through 13 and understand it. I want to say there's like one element before the last battle there where you're kind of like, huh, what's happening? But if you read Cliff Notes, like on Wikipedia or whatever they have for Wheel of Time, like you could probably just read the whole plot line of the other books and then you won't have to slog your way through all of them.
Yeah, because I didn't even finish book 8. I threw it against a wall and that was it. That
Yeah,
was
and I highly recommend the audiobooks. I listen to the audiobooks like while I'm commuting and while I'm doing chores around the house, and they're really well done. They're done by Michael Kramer and Kate Reading, and that's how I got through books 8 through 11.
how did they get
Yeah, right? That's like
that must have been
they
torture.
got paid a lot of money to do it. It's a job for them.
Yeah. But like I can't imagine it was any less of a slog for them.
Yeah.
Glad they stuck it out, so it's an option. But yeah, now I'm curious about reading a battle from 20 different perspectives.
Oh man, it was
I
a
have,
lot.
I have some big battles coming up. I don't think I'd do 20 different perspectives, but
Yeah, they say Robert Jordan wrote some of the scenes in the last battle. So it's not all just off of his cliff notes that Brandon Sanderson wrote.
still pretty cool that he was able to do that.
Yeah. The amazing thing when Brandon Sanderson took over, so there was a lovely little note from Brandon Sanderson about how he got chosen to take over the series in book, what was it? He started with book 12. And he was like, I didn't adopt Robert Jordan's writing style at all. I just wrote my own, but like, I didn't see much of a difference. And maybe this is why Robert Jordan's editor decided to ask Brandon Sanderson to do it because their writing styles are somewhat similar. And then he was also able to like give it the length that the series was expected to be.
Yeah, but like Brandon, I haven't read a lot of his stuff. I've read probably about 6 of his books, the 3 Reckoners books, which are superhero sorta, and the Elantris ones, which is the one book, and then there's like some shorter works with it. But like he doesn't describe every blade of grass in like extreme detail
Yeah.
like Robert Jordan does.
Yeah. So the descriptions are missing, but like the characters remain true to how they were originally written,
Yeah.
how they were supposed to be. And that's where I kind of felt like, oh, like that's not a new character that I'm reading about. Because I mean, he totally could have like got it all wrong and wrote new characters or something and then called them the same names, and he didn't. So that's why I liked
It
it.
didn't fix some of their annoying qualities. Maybe I won't read the book. Some of the characters were, I hated so many of them by book 8. They were so annoying.
The only one that I hated was Elaine. And then Perrin's
Yes.
glory days, I think, were in book 5. And then his characters are kind of like, why is he doing
and Matt.
But like I loved him so much from book 5 that I could forgive him. But like Elaine is just why? Like maybe it makes sense because she's supposed to be like a princess or something, but it's still like that doesn't mean you own the whole world, girl.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious about the battle from 20 perspectives, but I'm not sure I'm curious enough to have to deal with characters that I just fell out of love with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I hate them, but I really didn't like them anymore. I didn't like some of them from the first book.
Okay.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll find out in a future episode that you come back in if I do ever go back and reread it.
That'd be cool.
Not giving you good odds for that though. I'd rather read through the Cosmere.
Yeah. The nice thing about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere is it's a lot of epic action adventure, but then he puts some comedy in there. It's kind of like comedic relief. And I'm just like, this is so great. Like, I have never read an epic fantasy where I've laughed so much as I have with Brandon Sanderson.
That's cool. I do that. I do add humor into mine.
Yeah, I feel
Because
like
I like it.
I started to become slightly inspired by the comedy in his. So I hope I'm writing a bit of comedy. Like I think it's funny. Like my editor for Court of Shadows and Games, she was commenting for her edits, and she was like, "This is hilarious. This is also hilarious. Oh, this is so funny." And I was just like, "Am I that funny of a writer? Because this is epic
Oh,
fantasy."
it's when you can inject humor and it's fun. The last trilogy that I put out, there was a lot of humor in it. Some of it was just kind of a ridiculous situation if you sat down and think about it.
But
I
that's
have
how you
to
do.
poke fun at it. Like,
That's
come
how you
on,
do
some
the good.
of the
That's how you
things
do
that
the
characters
good.
were doing were nuts.
That's how you do the good comedy. Like if you, I know you're not into romance, but like Bridgerton, this is how she does her comedy. That's why it's so funny because it's all situational comedy, and it's just hilarious. And that's how you do comedy. It's not necessarily what the people are saying; it's what they're having to respond to.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely had some comedy in there. All right, so all right, wow, we've had a really long-ranging conversation today. We've talked about Song of Siege and Shadows, which is out now.
Yes, it's out on Amazon and Kindle. I put the ebook in Kindle Unlimited for now to see how it does. And let's see, paperbacks you can get at Amazon and Barnes and Noble so far. I think they should be coming at a couple other bookstores, such as Books A Million and some other places. You can request that your library order the paperback of Song of Siege and Shadows, as well as you can request that a local bookstore that you go to can buy the paperback of this, and they should be able to fulfill that request. And then on Kickstarter, I don't know if I gave this to you, but I have the special edition Kickstarter. It is on late pledges for Kickstarter. So this Kickstarter ran in back in September.
Yeah,
And
you didn't give me a link for that, but you can
no,
do that.
I do need to email you
Yeah.
a link. I think I forgot that too. Maybe it's not quite in the questionnaire where I'm going to put it. So we have a special edition that is going to be sprayed gold edges and signed, and it has a lovely case laminate design, and it has some interior artwork in color, and then it has a map in color, and a beautiful dust jacket, and you can get it on Kickstarter for a late pledge if you want.
Yeah, I got to ask you where you got the gilt edges, because
I am spraying them myself.
Oh, you're doing it.
Yeah.
That is cool.
It's a fun thing to move into. It's definitely not something I ever thought I would do, but it's one of those like you'd have to ship the book like 3 different times in order to get it sprayed, and then you stand more chance of getting the dust jacket damaged.
That's what I was looking at. And then there is a printer that does the edges, but it's not. Book Vault will do now the colored edges, but not gold. That's not one of the.
I was gonna try out Book Vault for getting this printed, but I ended up having to go with Ingram Spark again because I went to set up a title in Book Vault and it did not like anything that I put in there for like what kind of a title I wanted to set up. It was really sad.
Okay. I've done a whole bunch in there.
Okay. Well, maybe one day we'll have to hop on a Zoom.
Yeah, hit me up. Yeah, because these guys behind me are gonna have the red edges. I'm waiting for the proofs. That's why I'm not talking about them yet. I haven't seen them. I want to see what it looks like and make sure it's good. And like, all the black pages that they look good. So I did the black chapter pages with the color image and the white text, and I want to see it. Like, what is the reverse page readable? Is there too much, bleed through or whatever? Because we don't, we choose the paper, but you can't touch it. You're not like, you don't see a sample of it on there to see like how things print. You have to order things and check it.
Yeah.
And
that's why I get nervous.
I've been waiting for. I ordered it on September 26th. So hopefully in the next week or so I'll get it so I can see what it looks like.
Okay.
Because I want to know, like, before I go too far with this, like, is it going to work? I just did plain red edges to not to get too crazy for this one.
I missed something. My whole screen froze for a couple seconds.
Oh, okay. No, I just said that, I did the colored edge with Book Vault, and yeah, I ordered it end of September, and I was just waiting for to see it, and to see, as I did the black chapter headers with the color image, and the white text, to see how that looks. Like, what is the reverse page readable?
Okay.
So many questions. Soon I will have answers, I hope.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So this is, and book 2 is coming out, you said possibly in March?
March 27th. Yeah, I got about 6 months it's all the way drafted. It got a developmental edit. I've got to do revisions and then send it through whatever other type of editing I want to do on it. So yeah, it'll be here in about 6 months from now.
Nice. And then possibly in 2025 for book 3. Depending on how this big crossover thing you're planning is going to go.
I also have in 2025 a Kickstarter that I got to run on the special edition for book 2. So that might take up more time than I'm thinking. So I might not get as far into writing book 3 as I was hoping, but we'll have to just see how 2025 pans out.
Yeah. No, you'll keep us, you'll be back, and it's first for another episode, and you'll keep us in the loop. Yeah. And now you'll have to pick another epically long fantasy series to come back and give us updates about, because we're done with the Wheel of Time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about any of the many things that we have talked about today?
No, I'll say something that I didn't say.
Sure.
I think this podcast is going up today, right?
Yes.
Okay, so The Heir, my debut novel, is free right now on the ebook. And then The Crown is on a 99-cent sale. The Crown is the sequel to The Heir, and it has never been on a sale this cheap before. So if you read ebooks, go grab the ebooks of those two. The sale ends, I think, on Monday, October 21st, 2024. And yeah. And otherwise, just go grab Song of Siege and Shadows, because it's my new book. And if you want to read my new book, go read it.
So is it free, The Heir, for the stuff your fantasy Kindle, stuff your Kindle fantasy edition, whatever we're calling it, stuff with fantasy?
No, by the time I decided that I wanted to join that, the applications were closed. I landed a BookBub featured deal, and I decided to do a free one this time just to see how it would go. And yeah, so that's why it's free. And I was hoping that it would also lead to some spill-off sales into the new book.
Awesome. So, all right. So you all have your marching orders. Go out and get the free books, get the 99-center, and grab the new one. And anything else you would like to say about it? We've covered the things that we forgot to talk about.
That's it. Thanks so much for having me. This has been so much fun.
Thanks for joining me. And again, this is Fantasy Lore and More podcast, where we talk about fantasy books with fantasy authors. And today we had Claudia Klein, and we talked about a Song of Siege and Shadows, which is a really awesome title. I love your titles. I forgot to tell you that last time I was on here. You have such cool titles.
Thanks. I think long and hard about them, and then yeah, they always work out.
Oh, that's cool. I tend to be obvious. Oh, the book is about summoning a god. Let's just call it Summon a God. That's how I title things. No secrets. Just we do what it says in the title. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day or great night wherever you are. We'll be back with another fantasy author and talking about more fantasy books very soon. I think in 2 weeks is the next one, but I could be wrong. There's definitely one in November so far scheduled. I just don't remember which day it is. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.